Hello, my dear viewers. Today, I have a very special story for you, full of intrigue, unexpected twists and turns, and courtroom denouements. This is the story of Dustin, a simple guy from Texas who came to conquer London with his unique spark and the undeniable charm of a Texas cowboy. His first steps in this global melting pot are marked not only by interactions with a host of strangers, but also by an encounter that could change his life. The entrance of Anna, a woman with indescribable charisma and a mysterious past, sets the beginning of a chain of events full of challenges, laughter, and maybe even love. Are you ready to follow Dustin and Anna on their journey through secrets and discoveries in the heart of London? Then fasten your seatbelts, there's an exciting adventure ahead. Lucky, so lucky. Chapter 1. Dustin stood at the bar door of a swanky hotel in the center of London. He stood and looked around, soaking up the atmosphere of the place and the exoticism of the world around me. It was almost an overwhelming experience for the average guy from Texas to arrive at Heathrow Airport and catch a famous London cab to get to a 5-star hotel. Now he was ready to take his first steps in this global melting pot. Those gathered in the hotel bar epitomized the cosmopolitan, global atmosphere of the entire city. It was a multinational crowd, and different languages could be heard. However, when the figure stopped in the doorway, most of those gathered froze and looked around. In front of them stood an ordinary man of mature years. But it wasn't so much about him as it was about his clothes. Instead of the usual expensive business suit that everyone else was wearing, the figure looked out of place. Dustin noticed the change in the atmosphere in the bar. He saw that eyes suddenly turned in his direction, and the volume of conversation in the room decreased. He smiled slightly, realizing that he was the cause of the change. To say that Dustin looked anachronistic would be an understatement. At 5 feet 9 inches tall, Dustin was by no means an imposing specimen. The fact that he was 70 years old only added to his questioning look. Perhaps it was the big, white, wide-brimmed Stetson cowboy hat, the long-sleeved Ariat shirt, the starched and wrinkled Wrangler jeans, or the heeled ostrich leather cowboy boots. No sooner had Dustin taken 3 steps into the bar than he heard the first question. "Are you really from Texas?" Dustin stopped and grinned widely. "Yes, sir, it is, and I'm damn proud of it." This opened up a veritable floodgate of introductions, handshakes, and new questions. Soon, Dustin found himself with a pint of the best ale at a local bar, and a crowd gathered around him, bombarding him with questions about himself, Texas, and what he was doing in London. Dustin kept smiling, answering questions affably, and taking a few sips of ale along the way. The crowd changed over the next few hours, but the interest in him never waned. Dustin was never short of a pint of ale, and he never once put a penny on the bar to pay for it. The crowd around Dustin was thinning, but as more people came into the bar, the interest in this unusual man continued to draw attention. That changed when another figure entered the bar and stopped to look around. The occupants of the bar, mostly men, turned around as if some mysterious message had been given to them. They all turned to look, including Dustin. In the doorway stood a tall, shapely, and utterly divine woman. She was tall. With her heels, she had to be at least 6 feet tall. Her face was framed by soft blonde curls that cascaded down to her shoulders. She was shapely. The white button-up blouse she wore was tailored to fit her upper body. The transparent material did not hide the outline of the bra that lifted and showed off her cleavage so spectacularly. She was wearing a pleated black skirt that went down her long figure to her knees. She stood in the doorway, legs slightly apart, and looked around the room. It was a long, slow gaze, as if she were evaluating everyone present against some checklist in her mind. Everyone noticed the pause in her gaze when she saw Dustin standing at the bar, with a glass of ale with a cowboy hat pulled up over his head and tucked to his elbow. A soft smile appeared on her face as she made a sudden decision. Almost the entire male entourage in the bar watched as she backed away, heading straight for Dustin, and stopped beside him. Dustin, for his part, watched the entire few seconds with as much interest as any other man in the room. When he saw the woman approaching him, he waited to see what she was going to do. Dustin sipped his ale as the woman approached and stopped beside him. She decided to stand just inside what he would call his personal sphere, the distance most people keep from each other as a sort of buffer zone. She positioned herself just inside Dustin's sphere. He watched her over the rim of his glass. She stopped and waited a few seconds before taking the initiative. "Are you really from Texas?" This question caused laughter and giggles in the small crowd at the bar. A voice came from behind. "You're a little late. He's already answered that question at least a dozen times." The woman identified the source of the comment with her piercing blue eyes, and the voice fell silent and the laughter quickly subsided. There was no doubting that the gaze was on her. She turned to Dustin again. "I'd still like to hear the answer." Dustin set his glass on the counter and turned to face the woman. "Yes, ma'am, I'm from Texas. I'm Dustin Prescott." He saw the look in her eyes soften. "Nice to meet you, Dustin Prescott. I'm Anna Gerhardt." She held out her hand, and Dustin took it firmly. "My respects, ma'am. I don't know much about these parts, but I haven't heard such an accent, even here." Anna smiled back at him. "You're very perceptive, Dustin. I'm not from the UK. I'm from New Zealand. I try to be aware of what's going on around me." Anna looked at the men standing around her. She noticed how they were looking at her, and where their gazes were mostly directed. She didn't mind turning her attention back to Dustin. "Dustin, order me a gin and tonic. I'll be right back. I need to freshen up, if you don't mind." "Of course." She turned and headed across the bar toward the entrance to the restrooms. Every eye in the place watched as she slowly strode across the bar and disappeared. Dustin was no exception. He turned to the bartender. "Get the lady a drink." The bartender nodded and got to work. From behind him, he heard another voice. "Be careful, buddy. It might not be as ladylike as you think." Dustin turned to see who was speaking and saw a tall man in his 30s, dressed in what appeared to Dustin to be an expensive tailored suit. "What makes you say that?" "Experience. I've been traveling and staying in places like this since university. My experience tells me she's working, not playing. She has all the signs of an expensive girl." Dustin raised his eyebrows. "Really? This is my first trip outside the US in my entire life. I'm not very good at this kind of negotiation." The tall Englishman grinned. "Don't worry, friend. Most of us here are well acquainted with this sort of thing. If you want to have a little fun, this is your chance. She's certainly nice enough to be herself and has all qualifications." Dustin chuckled. Several of the men nodded, and Dustin's newfound friend continued. "Let her take the initiative and see what happens. If we sense anything amiss, we'll alert you." "Thank you." Anna returned to the lounge and walked over to the bar, even closer to Dustin than before. She brought her glass to her lips and hesitated. "You wouldn't slip something in my drink and then take advantage of me, would you?" Dustin grinned. "You never know." She looked at him and then took a big sip of gin and tonic. "I think with all these witnesses you can safely bet. What are you doing in London?" Checking the items on my wish list. "Is London on your wish list?" "Among other things." Dustin felt her knee rubbed lightly against his leg through the material of his Wranglers. He sipped his ale, keeping his gaze on her. "Which ones?" "The usual. London, Paris, Bangkok, and a few other specific things. I'm getting old, and I thought it was time to make a change to the list before it was too late." "You don't look so old." "Old enough to be your daddy, I'm sure." This elicited a few chuckles from the group still standing around. At this point, Anna flinched slightly and looked over her shoulder. A swarthy man, Dustin assumed to be of Indonesian descent, suddenly lowered his eyes. Dustin saw the flash in Anna's eyes. "Don't touch the products. This is not a Jakarta market where you can fondle the products before buying." She turned to look at Dustin again. "Does age matter a lot to you?" Dustin shrugged. "Over the years, I have left behind many of my former experiences. Now I am little affected by what people do or say." He saw her smile with the corners of her eyes. "That's what I like about older and wiser men. They've lost a lot of their ego and self-centered arrogance." Dustin didn't answer, preferring to sip his ale and wait. Suddenly, the man Dustin had seen sitting at the far end of the bar approached him. He stepped into the narrow space between Dustin and Anna, coming face to face with her. He paid no attention to Dustin and spoke without any introduction. "Are you free for the evening?" Anna looked up at him. Dustin was watching with what appeared to most of the others to be an amused expression on his face. "What's on your mind?" "An evening of dinner, dancing, and companionship?" Anna looked at the man. He was well dressed, about 170 centimeters tall and a little overweight. It was also obvious that he was more than a little drunk. She smiled, but without the softness in her eyes that Dustin had seen before. "Tell you what, if you can sober up, and if I'm here in 2 hours, come back and we'll see." The man looked at Anna and nodded. "I'm going to go grab a bite to eat and take a shower. I'll change and be back in 2 hours." He turned and walked away. Anna watched him go and giggled slightly. When she turned to look at Dustin, she saw the piercing gaze of his steely gray eyes. How much is this little socialization going to cost? She looked hurt as she answered, "Nothing, of course." "I see. So you enjoy your time here on the house?" She wrinkled her nose slightly and looked a little annoyed. "Does everything have to be a deal?" "I guess that's up to you." "Touché." Dustin looked around at the men still huddled around the bar. Most of them were wondering how the man from Texas was going to play out this little drama. Some were pondering how, with luck, they would be able to involve themselves in this scene. Dustin continued. "Is an evening's entertainment on your wish list?" Dustin laughed. "This probably falls under other delights not listed elsewhere." Almost all the other men laughed, and another pint of ale appeared on the bar. Dustin looked at the glass of gin and tonic and nodded to the bartender. Quickly, another drink appeared, and the empty glass was carried away. Anna looked at Dustin almost warily. She had a sudden feeling that this Yankee wasn't as gullible and naive as he seemed. She leaned toward him and put her hand on his waist. "How about you ask me to dinner, and I'll ask you to dance? I'm sure we can come to some sort of understanding." Dustin didn't flinch or shorten the distance between them. His action seemed to make Anna a little nervous. He glanced over his shoulder at the man who had spoken earlier. "What's your name, friend?" "Reginald." "It's nice to meet you, Reginald. I'm Dustin, but I'm sure you already know that. Tell me, given your experience, what do you have to offer for dinner, dancing, and an evening of conviviality?" All eyes were now on the conversation. Anna looked a little puzzled, but remained silent. "Well, Dustin, given the lady in question and her obvious talents, I would hazard a guess that such an evening would cost between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on the length of the evening." "Will that upper number include all night, say until 10 a.m.? I doubt that can be discussed." Dustin's eyes never took his eyes off Anna. "Well?" Anna leaned back in her chair, surprise reflected in her eyes. "That seems like a fair assessment." Dustin looked at her and smiled. The smile made her slightly uneasy. "Is this proposal just for me, or will it be available to anyone who wants to take it up, or even improve it?" There was a sudden hint of worry on Anna's face. She hesitated before she spoke. I suppose that would suit you." Dustin's eyes seemed to sparkle. "Well, I think I will certainly accept the terms, but I will never prevent you from accepting a more favorable offer to improve your business position. Would any of you gentlemen care to improve upon that offer?" Anna suddenly looked worried. This wasn't the way it usually happened. Behind him, Dustin heard Reginald's voice. "I'd sweeten the offer by another 1,000. A large, swarthy man in an expensive suit suddenly entered the conversation. His thick Middle Eastern accent was hard to decipher, but it soon made itself felt. "I'm offering 10,000 by the end of the weekend." A heavy hand came down on Dustin's shoulder and squeezed it tightly. "And you, my cowboy friend, will join us." Dustin's face broke into a wide grin. He watched Anna, who now looked like a trapped rabbit. "What do you say, Anna? Spend the weekend with me and my friend?" Anna looked stunned. She looked into the eyes of the men around her, and they were all suddenly predatory. She swallowed, but it was hard. Her throat was dry. Suddenly Dustin raised his head and looked at the Arab. "What's your name?" "Ahmad. Ahmad. What if we invite all our new friends? You contribute 10,000 for the basic offer, and everyone who wants to join contributes another 1,000 each." Ahmad glowered. "That sounds like a great idea." Suddenly Anna was seized with a bad feeling. She had gone from negotiating a pleasant dinner, dancing, and companionship to becoming the centerpiece of what might be called a big gang fight. She looked around and almost panicked. The tension in the bar at the possibility of such action had most of the men on alert. Dustin just watched Anna with growing interest. Her fear and frustration only seemed to increase. The look of a trapped rabbit was now more like the look of a deer in headlights just before colliding with a car. He left her for a few moments, taking a sip of the rest of his ale. "Gentlemen, upon reflection, I think I'll take this young lady up on her offer myself. I'll put it down as one of the items on my wish list. I'm sure she'll do it beautifully." There was a general groan, and Ahmad spoke quickly. "I will gladly offer you my services if you will allow me to join you." Dustin seemed to pause and mull over the proposal. Anna watched him carefully. "Ahmad, my new friend. As tempting as the offer was, I regret to have to decline it. Perhaps another time. It's my to-do list, and I'm a bit finicky." Ahmad looked disappointed, but raised his glass in greeting. Dustin turned to Anna, stood up from his seat leaning against the bar, carefully adjusted the Stetson on his head, and extended his hand to Anna. "Shall we go, little lady?" She got up from the bar stool she'd been resting on, slipped her hand into his, and smiled. "I think it will be." Every eye in the bar watched enviously as they passed through the door and disappeared into the lobby. More than once they grinned merrily. The bartender just shook his head and went back to washing glasses. Epilogue. They walked down the lobby hand in hand, not speaking. Everyone was watching them, a cowboy with a beautiful woman in his arms. The security guard standing at the front desk shifted his gaze to them. He had never seen her before, but she had all the signs of one of the expensive girls one might find in a hotel. He didn't like it, but management seemed to turn a blind eye to such practices. Unless there was an obvious problem, he was ordered not to interfere. He suspected that the hotel management was receiving some kind of kickbacks. In the elevator heading to the concierge suite where he was staying, she turned to take his hand and rest her head on his shoulder. He smiled, and turning his head, kissed her lightly on the forehead. As they exited the elevator, they passed the concierge desk. Dustin nodded to the man and received an understanding smile in return. Dustin unlocked the door with his key and let Anna enter first, before stepping inside and securing all the deadbolts, latches, and chains on the door. Turning around, he saw that Anna was looking at him, her eyes brightening and her breathing a little quicker. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of $100 bills, counted out 50, and spread them neatly in a fan on the dressing table in the hotel room. Dustin looked at her with a knowing smirk. "That's what we agreed on. Dinner, dancing, and companionship. Damn it, Daddy. That was the best thing we ever did. Were you really going to let them all buy that joke? That's for me to know and you to find out. But right now, I'm more interested in seeing you smiling." Thus began Dustin and Diana's adventure. The idea was born when Dustin and Diana were lying on a huge iron bed in a dungeon in a boarding house in South Warwickshire. They had ended up there shortly before they were due to go on a trip. Anna was excited by the possibilities and the fantastic concept that Dustin had proposed. He called it a cheating girl. Dustin was originally from Texas, born, raised, and as he liked to say, by the grace of God. Anna was originally from New Zealand, but spent almost all of her adult life in the UK. As a doctor, she had a career in the National Health Service, raised a daughter who was now at university, and was reputedly beautiful. She was also 20 years younger than Dustin. Dustin was 70, in good health, and now single. In his 70s, he had managed to raise a family, pursue a career as a professional firefighter, and become a successful entrepreneur. Shortly before his 69th birthday, he bought a lottery ticket. The winnings totaled just over $1 billion. On his birthday, 3 days before Christmas, he learned that he was the owner of the only winning ticket in the largest state lottery ever held. By the end of January, he had everything in place to claim his winnings. The day after he, his then-wife, children, and grandchildren received the symbolic check in Austin, Texas, his wife of 46 years served him with divorce papers. She had the foresight to wait until the payout was scheduled. Dustin had chosen the annual payout option to maximize the return on his $5 lottery ticket investment. He planned to turn over most of the annual payout to the investment manager, leaving himself only what he saw fit. His wife had fervently insisted on receiving a lump sum of $600 million. Now, he realized why she had been so insistent on an immediate payout rather than an annual income. The lawyer, whose services Dustin used, tried to convince him to fight for a divorce. For his part, Dustin had already decided that he wanted to end the whole situation and move on with his life. The division of property was purely 50-50ths. Getting half of the $14 million each year for 30 years seemed to appease his wife. After 90 days, the deal was finalized, and he walked out of his attorney's office a lonely man after 46 years of life. His 3 children were shocked that their mother had decided to pull such a stunt. He tried to convince them not to hold a grudge and immediately set up a trust for each of his grandchildren with very specific instructions. He also gave each of his children $500,000 and paid taxes on those gifts. After that, he had more than half of his first annual after-tax payout left in his accounts. He put all but $500,000 into an investment manager account and never looked back. The first thing he did, after settling his affairs, depositing most of his personal belongings in storage, or handing them over to his children, and arranging for future retirement income, and lottery winnings to be transferred to several accounts, was to pack the necessary clothes, laptop, tablet, and cell phone, and book a one-way first-class ticket to the UK. He was on a mission. Dustin met Anna almost 10 years ago. It was an online friendship that began when she wrote to him on a forum to comment on one of his poems posted there. They started chatting regularly and developed a strong friendship that slowly and almost imperceptibly developed into a romantic relationship. Although they never met physically, there was an attraction and a sense of a much deeper connection between them. The main obstacle was that Anna was married, and her teenage daughter was hesitant to divorce her not-so-best husband. There were also financial considerations. She worked as a doctor in the UK, was well paid, and had all the family responsibilities of raising her daughter. She was dedicated, and Dustin knew she would never leave her daughter in her husband's care. Things had changed over the past few months. Dustin knew that Anna's daughter would be heading off to university in the fall and leaving home to begin her life's journey. The relationship with her husband had deteriorated further, and there was a fear that he might be leaning towards something bad. All of these considerations occupied Dustin as he sat in the airport lounge in Dallas. He had a plan. The only major obstacle was that it was his plan, and he wasn't sharing it with anyone. 18 hours later, he arrived in London. He had never traveled outside the United States before, so he was flying blind. Exiting the airport, he stood in line for a cab, and soon found himself in one of London's ubiquitous cabs. He smiled as he heard the cabbie address him. "Where to go, Chief?" Dustin thought for a few seconds. "Take me to the most beautiful hotel in London." The cab driver nodded, put it in gear, and they were on their way. Dustin kept his eyes on the window the whole way, taking in all the sights as the cab traveled the maze of streets that led to the Pan Pacific Hotel in London. When the cab stopped under a small portico, the doorman got out and opened the door. Dustin stepped out of the cab and held out a brand new black Amex card to the driver. A few seconds later, he received a check and a sincerely grateful handshake after a £50 tip. The bellboy escorted Dustin to the front desk. When Dustin saw that the lobby was bustling with activity, he was afraid that the hotel was completely full. To his relief, the receptionist assured him that they had a few rooms and suites available. A few minutes later, the bellman was already on his way to the room Dustin had chosen, despite its cost. Dustin spent the next week exploring London and taking all the tourist trips he had dreamed of his whole life. He saw the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, and all the other landmarks. He soon discovered that if he put on jeans, boots, and a cowboy hat, he rarely had to buy a drink at any pub he found. Not only that, he was making new friends and enjoying life immensely. Finally, he decided it was time to put his plan into action. The concierge at the hotel was happy to make inquiries and recommended a lawyer to help Dustin with business matters. After several meetings, the lawyer was somewhat skeptical of what Dustin wanted from him, but agreed to take on the project after the fee negotiations became very favorable to him. A week after their last meeting, the attorney had made some progress. Dustin was ready to start the next part of his plan. As usual, Dustin communicated daily with Anna through one of the chat programs. She still didn't know he was in London. As far as she knew, he was still in Texas, still married and thousands of miles away from her. That was all about to change soon. Dustin packed a small bag with the essentials. With the help of the concierge, he had already made travel arrangements. He took the London subway system to the nearest train station. There he purchased his pre-purchased tickets and was soon comfortably seated in the car. He was on his way to Birmingham. The trip was surprisingly short, no more than 2 hours. When he arrived in Birmingham, he checked into a small B&B he had booked online and set out to familiarize himself with the city. Once oriented, he arranged for an Uber to pick him up. He chatted with the Uber driver and arranged for him to stay with him for the rest of the day, promising a generous tip on top of the standard mileage. The Uber driver didn't seem to mind Dustin's plan. The first stop was at a well-known hospital. Dustin was well aware of Anna's place of work and her schedule. He told the Uber driver to park at the far end of the parking lot. Dustin got out of the car and leisurely strolled through the parking lot and hospital grounds, keeping an eye on the time. At about 3 p.m., Dustin found a spot near the front entrance with a bench and a screen of low bushes. He sat down and watched the front of the hospital. It was almost 3:30 when he saw a tall blonde woman leave the hospital and hurry toward the doctor's parking lot. He didn't approach her, he just watched. He knew she usually went home that day, unless she needed to do some shopping. Dustin hurried back to the Uber car and watched as Anna drove her small Fiat out of the parking space and turned onto the street. He told the Uber driver to keep a close eye on her. He didn't expect her to be suspicious, and his assumptions were correct. They followed her, and soon she turned toward a local food market, parked, and headed inside. The Uber driver did the same, and Dustin jumped out of the car. At the store, Anna filled a shopping cart. She intended to buy ingredients for the dinner she had planned. Dustin took the basket as well and followed her as she shopped. As she turned down an aisle and began to search intently for ingredients, Dustin cautiously approached her from the back. She stopped, looking for something on the shelf in front of her. Dustin stopped, almost touching her back, and reached over her shoulder to grab something from the shelf. She seemed a little disturbed by this intrusion, but simply stepped back a short distance. Dustin looked at the box of pasta in his hand and spoke to someone specific. "I wonder if it would be good with fresh sausage and vegetables." Anna wasn't paying too much attention, but something about the voice she heard made her stop. She didn't want to be intrusive, so she listened for a few seconds, hoping the voice would come again. When the stranger spoke, she was surprised by the question. "Excuse me, have you ever made pasta like this before?" Anna turned to look at the source of the voice behind her. The voice seemed familiar, but it was strange. There was an unusual woodiness to the voice, and the accent was completely out of place. She looked at the box of pasta in the stranger's hands. "No, I don't think I've ever used that brand." When she finished speaking, she looked up at the stranger and saw a wide smile on his tanned face. She didn't understand for a second, until the stranger spoke again. "Thanks for your help. I think you guessed I'm not from around here." Her eyes and mouth went wide. She almost dropped the grocery basket she was holding, and her knees went a little weak. Dustin saw the look on her face and grabbed the grocery basket. "Whoa, don't drop your stuff." "Who? How? Oh my God, Dustin, what the hell are you doing here? For groceries." With her free hand, she slapped his chest and he saw her eyes narrow. "Oh, you. Why didn't you tell me you were in the UK? I wanted it to be a surprise." Her hand rested on his chest after the last time she'd pounced on him. Her eyes softened, and then she looked at him incredulously. "Let me get the rest of my things, and then we need to find somewhere more private." "I agree." Eventually, they found themselves in a small coffee shop not far from the market. Sitting across the table from each other, Dustin still said nothing. Anna, on the other hand, was chatting animatedly. "I can't believe you're here. When did you get here? How long will you be here? Where are you staying? Oh my God, I must look like a teenager telling you all this." He smiled and reached out to touch her hand. "I got here a little over 2 weeks ago. I'm here until I finish what I came here for. I have an apartment in London, and I've booked a room in a B&B here for a few days. I like it when you talk. I just want to watch you and listen to you." She blushed. They continued chatting for a few more minutes before Anna remembered his words. "What did you come here for? Catch you." She gasped. "What? You know I'm still married. Even if Diana is at university, I still have commitments at the hospital and clinic." Dustin anticipated her reaction and just smiled. "I know you need to get home and get dinner ready, but I want to give you a little warning. Your husband will have some news for you tonight. Listen to what he has to say. Here's the phone number and the B&B where I'm staying. You go home. Try not to think about it too much. Keep your wits about you and call me when you can." He stood up, leaned over and kissed her lightly on the forehead, then walked out of the cafe. She sat stunned until she could pull herself together and head to her car to go home. Dustin went back to his Uber and asked the driver to return him to the B&B. There he paid the Uber driver and gave a solid tip. The young man smiled broadly, and Dustin watched him drive away. In his room, he made himself comfortable, put his tablet and charger on the small table, and settled down to watch the local TV. He was both excited and a little worried about how the next few hours would go. Across town, in a beautiful detached house, Anna was busy preparing dinner. Her thoughts weren't on the recipe at all. She was completely absorbed in her thoughts, and the surprise she felt when Dustin appeared on the market out of nowhere. His statement that her husband would have news this evening had worried her a little. She and Bert hadn't slept in the same bed since Diana was born. Their relationship had been tumultuous at best, and they had only stayed together because Anna wanted Diana to have a normal family, not a divided one. She couldn't imagine what she should expect, or how Dustin would know what Bert might say. The usual routine awaited her this evening. Bert would come home from work, take a shower, complain about something, then make dinner and retire to his office. It had become so familiar that she didn't expect anything different. She was in for a surprise. Bert walked in as usual, but this time he threw his briefcase and jacket on the couch and went straight through to the kitchen. "We need to talk." Anna had heard this sort of thing before. Usually it was some barb about something she did or didn't do that he expected her to say, reading his mind. Otherwise, it might have been his announcement that he and his teammates were going away for a week, skiing in the Alps or sunbathing on the beach. Either way, she didn't care. Only Dustin's warning kept her attention. She grabbed a glass of wine and sat down at the breakfast table. Bert poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down as well. "I'm filing for divorce." The moment Dustin, this unusual visitor from Texas, stepped over the threshold of a luxurious London hotel, he brought the warmth and uniqueness of his native land into the atmosphere. From the very beginning, his appearance caused surprise and intrigue among those in attendance. His unique style and undisguised pride in his roots immediately became a topic of discussion and attracted attention like a magnet. This meeting with Anna, an enigmatic and charming woman from New Zealand, sets the beginning of their shared story, gently transporting us to a deeper understanding of the events that will unfold later on. The psychological aspect of this scene reveals the multifaceted nature of interpersonal interactions in a multicultural society. The moment when Dustin and Anna meet demonstrates how simple human interest and kindness can overcome stereotypes and prejudices. Dustin, despite his unusual attire for a London bar, quickly finds common ground with those around him, blurring boundaries and ideas about what is considered normal. Anna, in turn, comes across as a strong and independent individual, ready to accept and participate in this unexpected turn of events. The importance of this moment also lies in the fact that Dustin and Anna, two people from different parts of the world, are at the crossroads of their lives. Fate brings them together in a place where cultures and stories from around the world come together, emphasizing the limitless possibilities of human relationships. Their story reminds us that despite the differences in our backgrounds or cultural barriers, soul melding and mutual understanding are always possible. The scene in the bar where Dustin meets Anna is only the beginning of their journey together, full of discoveries and ups, and maybe even challenges. This first act sets up a promising storyline for us to unfold. We are only on the cusp of these events and relationships, and there is room for speculation and speculation about the future of our characters. What awaits them? What trials and joys will these two amazing people experience in the densely populated, but at the same time lonely metropolis that is London? Dear viewers, we have just begun to unravel this story, and I sincerely hope that you will follow me through the next chapters. If you are interested in this mysterious and heartwarming story of Dustin and Anna, the full version is already available on our Patreon. Join us as we explore together what fate has in store for them and gain a deep understanding of the psychology of the characters and the events that will unfold ahead. Thank you for being with me today. See you all again, and remember, every meeting brings with it the beginning of a new story.